It's story time with Stevig again. I'm just sitting here recollecting and reminiscing on how when I gave God full control of my life back in 2006, the pattern that I kind of saw. For years I had been a Christian and just kind of went through the motions, didn't really understand the commitment that God was asking of me and expecting of me. So, because it's far too easy, and we shouldn't take this for granted, and we shouldn't judge people for not understanding it. We need to help them understand that being a Christian is far more than how you identify yourself. Being a Christian is like active submission and surrender. I'm trying to make my tea. It kind of started, well, I got saved when I was 5. And I got baptized when I was 13. Tried to do the whole Christian thing. And basically met nothing but resistance. Until after about 3 years, 2.5 years, it finally wore me down. And I just said, okay, fine. I'll do whatever my friends, the people that would accept me in high school basically was the group of people that would stand out on the corner and smoke cigarettes, and they would occasionally use drugs or drink or stuff like that. Well, it's interesting that these were the only people that I really that welcomed me into their group. It was the only place I really found acceptance. So, I'm just trying to figure out how to be. And all the while, there's this core seed, there's this seed in my core that belongs to Jesus. And so, I'm going through the whole thing, and, like Romans 8:28 says, God works all things out to the good of those who love Him, and are called according to His purpose. So God used this season to basically break me down to where, I'm like, He intervenes, and I go to this Christian ranch out in California. Yeah. And, where I basically take the plunge and I'm reading the Bible every day. Every day. I'm just like, I'm taking a swim in it every day. Never really read it before. God said, it's time you at least get to know what's in this, so at least you have a historical overview of what happens in the Bible. So I'm like, okay, I feel like a bobblehead, bobblehead. So I get this healthy dose of the Bible, and I come home, and my life is very different, because I'm walking with Jesus, actually walking with Jesus, reading the Bible. People are amazed at how much I've changed. But by 2000, basically between 2000 and 2006, I kind of just did whatever. Until finally one day God broke me down. In July of 2006. And said, your way isn't working, is it? And I'm like, no, it's not. Because, I'd basically been unemployed since September or October, I don't remember, of 2005 when we had to close the coffee shop. And it got so bad that I was actually stealing money from my dad right out of his wallet while he slept, so that I could afford things like cigarettes and coffee and stuff like that. Until finally, in July 2006, God broke me down. So when He says your way isn't working, well, you can see it's obviously not working. So I'm like, yeah, it's not working at all. And He's like, well, are you ready to try it my way? I'm like, sure. Yes, I'm ready to try it your way. Anything has got to be better than this. And in that moment, I finally realized that being a Christian was about active submission and surrender. It doesn't matter what I think, what I want to do, what I think I should do. That doesn't matter anymore. It's all about what God wants. Not my will, but yours be done. So, I find it interesting that, like I was saying, the first year that followed, God basically gave me a year of rest, of respite. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you a job and you can work for a year. So I found a job at the Ashland House, and I worked there for almost a year. First time in a very long time, I'm able to afford my own cigarettes, afford my own coffee, afford my own gas in my car, stuff like that. And so I'm like, hey, this is awesome. God is finally going to take care of my life. And that is the real difference that it can make. However, was how much I've changed in the past 12 years. Why I'm nowhere near the person that I used to be 12 years ago. I used to be somebody that stole money from my dad. Let's kind of keep that between us, right? Just me and you, whoever's watching, it's our secret. We'll kind of keep that to ourselves. Nobody else needs to know. So I worked this job for about a year. In March of 2007, it becomes a full-time job because they opened this Irish pub, which gives the business a lot more business, and they can actually afford to employ people full-time. So I'm working full-time as a dishwasher. And God is so good, he even gives me a girlfriend at the time. Sometimes I wonder why he does that, because it always seems to end and then everybody's sad. But the time we were together, it was great. Girl named Kelly, lived all the way out halfway to Galesburg. But she was a really sweet girl, really nice. Loved hanging out with her. We went out all the time, and it was nice. I need my coffee. Hold on a second, so I can get my coffee. I need my coffee, buddies. Milk, milk, milk! I need milk for my tea. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddies, I got my tea! Long story short, honestly, it was more like March of 2007 when my life started to get really good. I had a full-time job. I had a girlfriend. I was able to afford insurance, my own coffee, my own cigarettes, like basically my own needs. I was finally able to afford them. But what I didn't see coming was that God does not always do just good things in life, or life would not be life, and we would never grow, we would never go deeper and cling tighter to Jesus. What all of your Christians think about the niceties of the Bible, God will definitely bring you through the ringer to make you into a mature Christian. Jesus himself said, in this life there will be trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Well, what does that mean? It means exactly what Paul talks about in Philippians 4. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have a much. And no matter the situation, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, what that verse is saying is, it really doesn't matter whether you have little or whether you have a lot. What's important is that you find your strength in Christ, because he can empower you to do anything he wants. Now, this is the common misconception about that verse. A lot of people seem to think that that verse is a rally cry, so to speak. A lot of people seem to think that it is a rally cry to say, I am empowered. I am a Christian. I can go out there and everything I touch should turn to gold. That is not what it's saying at all. In fact, the Bible doesn't really teach that at all. Like I said, Jesus said, in this life you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. What exactly does that mean? I have overcome the world. It means everything that this life can throw at you, Jesus has overcome it. He died And he even overcame that. That's why in the letters to the churches, it's interesting that it's in the book of John, the Gospel of John, that Jesus says, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Because it is also in the book of Revelation, where Jesus came and visited John, that he talks about, be one who overcomes. John seemed to really get this idea that Jesus overcame, and so because Jesus overcame, we can overcome. Now what that means is that all these things that happen to us in life, we don't overcome them by stopping them from happening, but by transcending above them. We realize that Jesus is heavenly minded. And we need to be heavenly minded so we don't get mired down in all the drama that goes on in life. So back to my story. Wow, this is turning out to be a really long story. So, because it's about to take a twist and it's about to take a few twists and turns. So it's 2007 and I'm working full time and I'm really happy and I'm like, man, this Jesus thing is awesome. Like, I should have done this years ago. Really being committed to Jesus. But I really didn't know what it meant to be committed to Jesus. I remember sitting in my dad's basement and seeing a thing about a guy named George Mueller. You've heard me talk about him before. George Mueller was a guy that lived in England and ran an orphanage and asked no one for anything. He had lots of needs because he ran an orphanage. He needed to feed the kids. He needed to do all this other stuff. And all he did was he just gave it to Jesus. He's like, Jesus, these are our needs. Please take care of them. And Jesus did take care of them. He always took care of them. And I remember in 2006, 2007, whenever it was that I saw this, I remember being blown away. And I'm like, holy crap. Is God really like that? Does he really do things like that? I couldn't believe it. But looking back over the last 12 years, he really does do things like that. And he can do things like that. And you really can trust him with all the details of your life. Why? So that you can overcome this life with Jesus. In the letters to the churches in Revelation, he talks about how these are all of the things that you're mired with, because the world will try to mire you down with all kinds of things. I want you to rise up above them with me and overcome them, because I have overcome them. And that is the hope of the message of, I have overcome, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And if you are in me, then you can overcome the world too. That doesn't necessarily mean fight against it, resist it, not take part in it. But, let Jesus carry you down the currents of life. So basically, Jesus wants us to overcome. He wants to help us overcome. He doesn't expect us to do it all ourselves. That would be religion and not Christianity. It is not about what we do to get to God. God is not up there holding the measuring standard by which we should live, expecting us all to reach it. No, he is up there and he is holding a standard, but then he's reaching down and helping to pull us up to it, because we can't get there on our own. We are miserable worms of people, and that is why Jesus came. That's why in Romans 5 it tells us that while we were still sinners, we were dead in our trespasses against God. We had no mind of our own except to do what our flesh desired. And while we were in this dead state, Jesus came and died on a cross for our sins so that we could all be elevated, because none of us could reach him. Alright, so anyway, back to my story. This is getting pretty preachy, but that's good. I like preaching. I love to preach. I love preaching. So, okay, so I work this job, and life is good, but now it's time for Jesus to basically throw me into the sea. My life, I had finally handed over God control, and my life was in His hands. Now, here's the thing. He's not going to do this to you unless you willingly give Him control. He's nice like that. He's like, well, I'm not going to make you do anything if you don't really want to do it. Unless you say, you're in charge. See, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he said, God, Father, please take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours be done. It was an act of submission saying, you know what, God, I know that if we really don't want to do something, you're not going to force us to do anything, but when we are in submission to you, and we want what you want, He may take the initiative. And so here I am, I'm in Jesus' hand, and Jesus is like, boy, I've got a lot of work to do in this guy because he hasn't even grown up yet. He's still a boy living in his dad's basement. He's almost 30 years old, and he can't even take care of himself without a safety net. So I'm going to be his safety net, and he can trust in me. So I lose my job. I go back to the only thing that I know how to do, and that's steal money from my dad, and he's like, oh no, I ain't having this. So he kicks me out. God waited 10 years for me to finally say, okay, God, I put my life in your hands, for him to finally be able to do the thing that needed to be done. It may have been one of the most painful and hard things that I ever had to do in my life and deal with, but it was also the catalyst for one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, is when my dad kicked me out of his basement and said, it's time for you to go be a man, go figure your own way out. I'm not enabling the way you're living anymore. And so I ended up homeless for a week, and then I, was able to earn $100 helping tearing down the Heart of Illinois Fair. It was a terrible experience, but I did it, and I got $100 for it, and I took that money and I hightailed it to Iowa because I didn't want that. And I got up there and I got a job at Hardee's, and again, I'm working full time. And I'm like, yay, Jesus, this is the way it's supposed to be. And then I went back to Illinois to get all my stuff, and I brought it up here, and I got moved into a better apartment. But I couldn't hang on to the job, and I lost the job again. And I got really mad because at some point, Jesus has to challenge everything you think about him. At some point, in order to grow you to trust him more, he's got to put you in a situation where nothing makes sense. And you're holding your fist out and crying out to Jesus, why is this happening? You were supposed to stop this. I lost my job. After 2 months, the same way I always lose jobs. And I cried out to Jesus, and I'm like, dude, this was not supposed to happen. What the heck? And he never really gave me an answer. Needless to say, I fell on hard times again, and I found myself in Albuquerque, New Mexico. God orchestrated. It's funny how God puts things together to make things happen. This girl that I knew from the ranch in California found me on MySpace because Facebook hadn't really taken off yet. So we started talking, and the next thing I know, we're like really into each other. And she's like, well, you should come to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have tons of jobs and tons of opportunities here. I'm like, okay. It's got to be better than living at my cousin's house, because it was a burden on them, and it was just not a good situation all around. So I'm like, well, this is good. So this girl sends me money to go to Albuquerque, and the church that was right down the street I had just happened to start going to, they even took an offering and gave me money to go there. So I go to Albuquerque, And what does God do? He immediately shatters what I think he's doing. Basically, the situation with the girl falls apart the day I get there. And the next thing I know, I've got nowhere to go. Nowhere to go, nowhere to be. And so this situation turns really bad. But Jesus is like, hey, I'm here. You need to lean on me. This is how this works. I need to teach you this real quick. When things go bad in life, you need to cling to me and trust in me. So I end up in the homeless shelter. 3 months. It takes me 3 months. And it's tax time. So I file my taxes from working at the Ashland House for the that whole year that I worked there. And I get enough money back that I can get moved into an apartment and afford the next 4 months of rent. 3 months, I don't know, a while. So I get, moved into this apartment, get rent paid up for a couple of months, and now I'm just waiting to turn 30 so I can get the rest of this insurance settlement that God set up when I was 12, so that I could afford to stay there longer. Well, the time comes and I get the insurance settlement, and I'm paying my bills, and by October of 2009, I run out of money, and God says, all right, I'm moving you back to Bloomington, Illinois. God's like, yep, I'm moving you back to Bloomington. I'm like, okay, so I'm moving back to Illinois, but I'm not moving back to where I used to live. I'm moving to Bloomington. Very distinct difference here. So I moved to Bloomington, and I'm there about a month, staying with my cousin, and it just doesn't work out. Guess what? Back to the homeless shelter. This time it's 7 months. 8 months. It's 8 months. 8 months in the homeless shelter. I get a job at the Cracker Barrel. I'm doing night maintenance, occasionally washing dishes. Love doing the night maintenance. Spent a lot of quality time with God while I did night maintenance. Finally got into my own place, into a house in Bloomington. The real interesting part of this story is I lost my job at the Cracker Barrel because no job seems to last. There are numerous reasons why I lose jobs. None of which are because I'm lazy. God has this ability to change the way we perceive an experience. Like right now. Right now, I work at IGA. I work in a gas station, and I have no idea what he did or how he enabled me to endure my job. Clearly, something has changed. This job would be no different than any other if I'd gotten it way back in the day. I would have gone to work. I would have been annoyed by things, I would have been irritated by things, stressed out, and I would have lost my job because I got overwhelmed and stressed out, but something has changed. Somehow, using all these experiences, I sat in that house in Bloomington for 3 years waiting to get SSI because I had no income. So I never had any money. Imagine this, I had food stamps. I was able to get food and eat. I had no money to ever do anything, go anywhere, or anything. For 3 years. 2011, 2012, 2013. No, I take that back because I got the last little bit that my mom had locked away of my insurance settlement in 2012. That lasted a little into about March or April of 2013. So that helped me out a little bit. But the rest of it, I had no money, no income, and I had to learn to be content with nothing, with little, as Paul puts it in Philippians 4. I had to learn to be content with a little so that when I finally got my SSI, I could be content in having a lot, in having abundantly. Which I did, and so, I think it was those 3 years that changed the way I look at just about everything. I learned to be content and want for nothing. when I had nothing but a computer to wake up to, and shows to watch on my computer, and music to listen to, and games to play. Because I had already resigned myself. I couldn't work a job. I wasn't going to be able to work a job. And so God was like, fine, I'll get you on disability. I'll put you on SSI. So I had started that process, and I had to wait for 2.5 years. You see, God has this ability to teach you things when you don't even know you're learning them. You think you're just enduring through a hard season of life, and you don't even realize that He's reshaping your character and the way you look at everything. You don't even know it. You don't realize it, but He is. And so here I am. I'm sitting here now, able to work my job because I'm grateful for what I have. I don't whine about or focus on what I don't have. I'm grateful for what I have, and I have learned to be content whether I have a little or whether I have a lot, because it's not about the having that makes you content or happy. It's that you find your strength in Jesus, that you find your purpose and your fulfillment and your happiness and your identity in Him. When it becomes all about Him, it ceases to become about anything else in the world. When Jesus says, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. That means if we put all of everything that we are in Him, we overcome the world with Him. And we may not even realize it. It just kind of happens. Like I was changed. God has completely reshaped my character without me even knowing it. I didn't even realize it. I'm sitting here a year ago, afraid that if I got a job, the same thing would all happen that has always happened, because I had no reason to believe that it wouldn't. And here I am. I'm working a job, and I'm about to, reach a year of working this job, and it's just different. I have no trouble holding down this job. Absolutely none. I love my job. I love what I do. I'm not afraid to do what is necessary and take as long as it requires to get the job done right. And you know what? I think God taught me that through all of the music suites that I made. About 5 years ago, I embarked on a journey. I was able to get my hands on the 15-disc box set of every piece of music that had ever been recorded for Star Trek: The Original Series. I got it in my head. I got this crazy idea that I'm going to go through every episode and listen to how the music is put together and strung together and works together. I learned not only a bunch of editing skills in putting together music suites that had 86, roughly on average, 86 multi-tracks to it. But I also learned to, no matter what, doing those taught me that no matter how much work it takes, take the time and do it right. Because if you don't, every time you listen to it, it's going to be an ear sore for you. And you're like, oh, I need to go back and fix that. So I got used to working 5-6 hours at a time on a music suite, creating something that I loved. And I loved making them. It truly was a marriage of me doing something I loved as if it were a job. And I spent 3 years making these Star Trek music suites, and it taught me. It really did. I remember I actually saw this happen. The perseverance of doing it right the first time. No matter how long it takes, do it right. That was always something that I had a hard time doing. I would skate through my jobs because I wouldn't take the time to make sure that a job was done right. I would try to get it done so I could move on to the next thing. I don't know. See, I hate to tell people that you can't be lazy at a job, because I used to be lazy, and I don't know how I stopped being lazy. I just suddenly became not lazy. I can't explain how it happened. So in the end, I guess all I can say is, screw everything else and put your hope and trust in Jesus, and He will teach you to not be lazy. There it is. Jesus is the universal cure for all of your problems. Having trouble holding down a job? Trust Jesus. Give it to Jesus. He will fix it eventually. It only took 12 years for Him to fix this in my life. In 2007, I got so mad that I lost my job at Hardee's in Iowa because, Jesus, you were supposed to fix this. I didn't realize that He would fix it. It would just take 12 years of what? I don't know. Learning to be content with having a little or having a lot. Learning to do a thing right no matter how much work it entails. I don't know. I don't know how God changed me. He just did. And I'm a completely different person now than I was 12 years ago. I've lived a lot of life. I've lived a lot of hard life. I've had to endure a lot of things, and somehow that shapes you so that it reshapes the way you do things that seem completely unrelated to what you've been through. I'm just telling you, people, you need Jesus. No matter what your problem is in life, you need Jesus. Jesus will somehow eventually fix everything, because you know what, looking back on my life, it's far less important to me that it took this long than the fact that God finally changed it. I'm far less concerned with the fact that God, I could get really upset about that. I could be like, you know what, Jesus, you waited until I was 39, 40 years old, whatever, to finally get me to where I could even work a job. Don't you think it's a little too late for that now? I could get really upset about that, but I really don't care. You know what? Because I have overcome with Jesus. I have risen up above the minutia of the mundane of this life, because time doesn't matter. I don't care. I've always been the kind of person where, and I recognized this right before I won my SSI money. You know, when I finally get this money, I'm going to forget about all of these years of anguish, you know, flopping around like a fish out of water, saying, I can't take care of myself. I'm just going to forget about it, because it won't matter anymore. I have the money now, I can take care of things. And that's exactly what happened. And I knew it would happen, because that's what always happened. Whenever I finally get through a season of life that is hard, I typically don't look back. I'm just like, okay, that's over, and I forget that it was even a thing, because I'm like, well, I'm good now, and God is good, and we're all good. We're all fine down here. Thank you. How are you? So that tends to be my attitude, because really the things of this earth don't really matter to me. I tend to be very heavenly minded. The mundane minutia of this life really doesn't matter, because I am not of this world. In summation, I gotta wrap this up. In the end, whatever your trouble is, you need Jesus. Jesus is your answer. Because if you're mired down by all of the crap that life is throwing at you, what you need is a different perspective. You need to be able to elevate yourself above the situation and look at it with a heavenly understanding. Jesus wants to help elevate you so that you can overcome. You can be someone who overcomes. Take heart, I have overcome the world. If you put yourself in me, you will overcome the world with me. Anything that happens in this life, the IRS wants all my money. My bills, there's too many bills, I can't keep up with my bills. What you need is Jesus. He will help take care of your problems. It will not be instant, more than likely. He offers wisdom to those who ask for it. Wisdom that you can't get anywhere else. This is the wisdom of the one who created everything, who maintains planets around its suns, who keeps the atom together. All the problems that we have in the world, the answer is just Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the answer to everything. Everybody just needs Jesus. Alright, so I know this has been a really long story. I'm sorry. I didn't expect it to be this long. I just wanted to try to tell a story. How the last 12 years have changed me and how I went from who I used to be to who I am now. And what got me there. And it ended up being a really long story. So, peace out, guys. Have a good one.